2022 is a very important year for dealing with the issue of bottom trawling on seamounts on the high seas. The United Nations General Assembly will be conducting a review of the actions that have been taken by high seas fishing nations since 2006, when the first of the resolutions calling for urgent action and laying out a blueprint for doing so was adopted by all member countries of the United Nations, including the ones that are actually doing the fishing on the high seas. Since 2006, there has been some real progress in protecting deep ocean ecosystems from bottom trawl fishing on the high seas. We would estimate that somewhere around 3/4 of the areas of the high seas that are at fishable depths are now off limits to bottom trawling and in many cases other types of bottom contact fishing. But that still leaves quite a bit of these seamounts and other sorts of areas that are rich in biodiversity in the high seas is still exposed to the risk of damage from bottom trawl fishing. But there are still large areas of the high seas where bottom trawl fishing continues to occur on seamounts, deep water ridge systems, and areas characterized by a rich diversity of species and habitats such as deep water coral reefs, deep water coral gardens, sponge fields, and other types of species that support a rich and varied ecosystems that exist in association with these features. In 2022, we will participate in the United Nations General Assembly review along with other stakeholders, and we'll be calling on states to call for a prohibition of bottom trawl fishing on seamounts and other oceanic ridge systems and features as a means of completing the job that began with the UN General Assembly resolution adopted in 2006. And the good news is, although these ecosystems in many areas are still under threat, it's only a handful of countries that are doing this, the trawl fishing on the seamounts. Most notably, or the worst offender, as it were, is New Zealand and its trawl fleets operating in the South Pacific and Tasman Sea. We're not only working at the UN General Assembly, though, we've got a campaign going in New Zealand. 50,000 people signed a petition calling for an end to bottom trawling on seamounts in New Zealand. That was delivered to the New Zealand Parliament. And many of the NGOs that we work with in New Zealand are actively campaigning to put an end to the practice. You know, seamounts are extraordinary places. I'm involved in a European Union funded research, deep sea research project. It's the third I've actually been involved in, which is studying, amongst other things, seamounts. And some of the pictures they're bringing back of just the dense, rich coral covers on these seamounts are quite extraordinary. You wouldn't expect to see, you know, big coral, colorful coral reefs in an area that's 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters below the surface of the sea, where it's dark, it's cold, etc. But these are really rich, lush ecosystems that are thriving in these areas. And as you can imagine, towing several tons of heavy fishing gear through these reef areas or through the sponge areas or through the other types of areas where these habitats form is hugely destructive. And what motivated me to get involved in this issue in the first place is the concern that the scientists were raising over the destructive power of the trawling on these seamount areas and how, you know, and why it should stop.